To truly understand what I'm trying to do in this video, you have to first understand the reality of being a YouTubing woodworker. And that reality is that build videos rarely do as well as tool reviews or workshop videos. And so in chasing views, we stop building. And that's not good. So I'm going to try and force the issue. I've set myself a title. Not just a title to force me to build, but also a title for me to push to be better. And that title is the most beautiful thing I've ever built. Hang on a second. Building and beauty. These are the points. Will I achieve any of that? Well, it's a journey. And at the end, you tell me.
Come on.
For the build, I've opted for a lamp. I don't need a lamp, but that's not important. The materials are simple. A big chunk of sapele, some brass fixings, and the bulb. Not a dull, unattractive, regular bulb. This. And it brought me a few problems, but we'll get to them soon enough. This is what I chose for beauty's sake. It's heavy, the wiring is less than perfect, and well, the weight. But when it works, it's beautiful. Now, I'm no design guy. I'm a pencil and paper scribbler with very little design experience. So this is how I broke the build down. The body, the feet, and, to carry on the analogy, where the head is joined to the body, the neck. And with no clue how to complete the others, I decided to start at the head. It's a cylinder with an LED strip coiled and housed between two sheets of perspex. The light is tightly held in a coil with a series of laser cut hoops, all covered on the outside with a beautiful vintage oak veneer. The idea being that you will only see the veneer and none of the mess inside. But like anything you build, until it starts to come together, you don't always see all the issues before they arise. Like the weight. How to attach the veneer, how to cover the bits of plywood that are exposed. But I was confident that as they came, I would deal with them one at a time in the pursuit of fulfilling my title. But I will tell you a secret at this point. I've scripted this video 3 times, edited it 6 times, and each time not been happy with the outcome. I have hours of live Mark telling you about the process, the mistakes, the solutions, his feelings, and, well, let's just say it didn't feel right. But I won't cut any of the journey out. I'm just trying to talk a little less. And I don't mind admitting I was quite proud of this one solution here. The stack of hoops was not quite straight, so I laser cut another with around 2mm smaller dimension and flush trimmed everything to that. I was very proud, though it did cause me plenty of issues a little later on. And while I'm admitting my failings, there is also an after show video on Patreon right now explaining exactly how I felt right after finishing this build, with details of the issues and others that you either don't spot or weren't shown. The link's in the description. This is peel and stick veneer, the only way without a vacuum bag that I thought I could attach veneer to the head. But that flush trimming that I'd done earlier had created a very slight lean to the head. Not visible until you wrap a dead straight strip of veneer around it and it skews off very quickly, not covering the entire head. Solution? First of all, 2 layers for added strength because I was worried the veneer wouldn't be strong enough on its own due to the gaps I'd left. The gaps that are designed to try and bring the weight of the head down, a continuous issue through this entire build. So the inner layer was made of 3 strips and then the second made from 1 wide piece so that the skew was accounted for, starting at one edge and wrapping around and finishing on the other edge. The seam didn't actually have a solution as of yet, and the veneer didn't stick at the edges. I have no idea why. I did decide to rant at the camera, which I'll spare you, and then move on to the body part of the build. Now for something a lot harder. I'll let live in the moment Mark speak, as this was exactly what I was thinking at the time. What I want is one piece of wood, this piece of wood, to come from the base, curve round, level off and be completely horizontal when it meets the head. Simple, right? How it joins to the head, let's shelve that for now. And how thick and how curved the body needs to be is a bit of a moving goal right now. You see, I've tried to design this a few ways. First, I drew out a few in my sketchbook and I must say I really like this one, but I can't actually set my heart on it because I don't know if I can replicate it at a bigger scale. But let's shelve that doubt for now because to be honest with you, it's not helpful. That was just to show you how confident I was in the moment. I'm not a CAD guy. In fact, tech is a huge weakness in my skill set, so I took to pencil and paper. I needed to translate this curve to actual size. And for the build, steam bending and bent lamination was completely out of the question to get the curve, as was kerf bending. So the solution seemed to be a series of blocks and a template. I split my plywood template into sections and marked them off on the sapele I'd milled from the larger block. While you watch, I'll tell you about the challenges to come. First, I'd not thought out a solution to running the cord through the body. The title will not allow me to leave the cable exposed or clipped to the body. Beauty is key. Beauty over my suffering. And I will suffer for this shortly, and more later. I cut the blocks along the lines using a mitre gauge and the referential angles taken from the table saw blade itself. And here was my initial plan. The lower two blocks had to be wider, so they came from a solid block. I planned to drill through them for the cable. The others I made from two pieces taped together. The plan here was to route a channel along the centre. Let's just say that this was, well, you'll see. It's about to get ridiculous. And this is what I mean by ridiculous. Clamping the blocks together and then together, it just isn't possible. So I glued the two halves back together to make one solid piece and then tried again. If you're thinking now that I could have left it as one full block and then cut them, drilled through each one, well, you're right. And if you're also thinking that not angle cutting one end, leaving it square instead so I could use it to clamp, then cut it after would have been better, once again you're right. As I said, ridiculous, but in the end the result was achieved. Or so I hoped. That's a lot of holes to line up through the centre. And only end grain to end grain glue ups. You know what, I want to let live Mark back in here, as it may give you a feeling of where I was at in the build in my chase of beauty. So that's the end of day 3, and it hasn't been the most productive days. This is going to be the body, and I'm holding it gently because that glue up in the middle, it's slightly misaligned, but I can't take it apart again. I've attempted to clamp this maybe 20 times. Blocks pop off or clamps don't fit properly. I'm scared to sneeze around it, I'll be honest. But I'm going to leave it overnight, gently. Now I've clocked up around 10 hours of experience watching flush trimming videos on YouTube. So I consider myself some kind of an expert at this point. Sorry, I'm just getting a little giddy as this part actually went pretty well, which was a pleasant surprise. My aim was to trim the piece to the template, then card scrape and sand the inner and outer curves nice and clean. So then I can make a few beauty decisions, because at no time in this build am I losing track of the main aim. I took a little time to straighten the sides as best I could too, as I was pretty sure that would help with what was to come. And it's only now that I look back at the footage that you can see the change in my demeanour happening live. It's the reason I like live footage filmed in the moment. I was genuinely starting to see beauty coming through. Sure, there were still a lot of issues like the feet and the neck, but I could start to place the pieces together and get an idea of what I needed to do. And what I needed to do was fix a mistake from earlier, where the veneer had not stuck properly. So I cut a ring of solid sapele, glued it to the top, and then flushed it onto the head itself. Now I'm not going to pick holes in any of these fixes. If you want that, it's all covered on Patreon. Time for a quick hydration break. That, hands down, is the best water I have ever tasted. And here's why. It's because it's come out of this water drop, reverse osmosis countertop water filter. This one is the WD-A2, and Waterdrop are the sponsor of this week's video. We live in an area that is known for having incredibly hard and not all that great tasting water. And for years I have rotated these filter jugs. But no more, as the Waterdrop WD-A2 uses a 5-stage filtration system to remove 99.99% of harmful substances, clearing your water of chlorine, lead, arsenic, sediment and loads more. It also provides cold water as low as 15 degrees or hot water as high as 95 degrees within 3 seconds. And with the touchscreen controls, you can select from 6 different temperatures from 10 degrees, room temperature, 45, 65, 85 and 95 degrees, with 5 different volumes of serve. Personally, I like the room temperature option. But as I also drink a lot of tea, I like the 95 degree option too. Setup is really simple as it just sits on your counter with no need for plumbing and a filter that is really easy to install. And remember, each filter is designed to last for up to a year. And the machine will even tell you when it needs changing. And the water tank at the back is easily bigger than the 2 filter jugs I've been using combined. And also having this removable jug so you can take filtered water to your cooking, I think that's a really nice touch. But if you're looking for other types of filters, Waterdrop also makes a whole range of other solutions, including under-counter plumbed-in solutions, cold water dispensers and under-sink filters too. So, as water makes up such a large percentage of our bodies, if you want a long-term investment in your health, please check out the links down in the description. Now that we're hydrated, let's get back to the build. Now the neck. I'm calling this a Morton and Tenon style fixing, but I'm pretty sure it's not correct, so feel free to correct me in the comments. But it did do the job of holding everything together. Oh yeah, and I added some thin veneer to the top, as I had a sudden realisation that this was the bit you would see the most. And beauty means covering plywood wherever possible, and filling some more veneer gaps with epoxy. This was an ongoing battle throughout the build. Anyway, the neck was completed and fitted, with a couple of perpendicular braces creating a cross, as I was using glue for this and no extra fixings. And now we've got a couple of jobs to do that can genuinely derail this entire project. First we have to complete that mortise and tenon joint on the body itself. And for that, I opted against hand tools, deciding instead to use a stop block and adjusting the fence on my table saw so that I could basically create a mortise with a sloped back. That way the head could move. Well, you'll see that shortly when I get it all fixed together. And now for a bit I genuinely don't think I can show you for 2 reasons. 1, I'm not actually sure it's entirely safe, and 2, I neglected to turn the camera on when I did it. But what you can see are my practice swings, so to speak. I did this for a while to get the confidence up to make the cut. You see, I took another look at the body and the end grain glue up started to worry me. I needed strength on the outside to be precise. The head is heavy and that is a potential fail area. And a broken lamp is just not beautiful. Damn that title. So my plan's this, and hopefully you saw it in the practice swings. I used the table saw with the blade raised 2.5mm to cut a channel along the back of the body to house a brass 3mm by 4mm wide strip. This will run right down the middle, covering up the seam where I glued the 2 blocks back together. And actually it went pretty well, but not perfectly, hence me not showing you in case it isn't actually safe. There was quite a bit of slipping that needed patching. Quite a lot of patching. And a frantic glue up of the brass strip using 5-minute epoxy, also known as summertime 2.5-minute epoxy. And you recall the seam where the veneer met itself on the head? Well, that got some brass too. This whole process was formed from a mistake. The visible seams from cutting the blocks in half that made up the body in order to just route a channel, and the lack of strength. And the cleanup of this was an absolute nightmare. Ceramic sandpaper doesn't hold up well on brass. But I had to get the brass flush with the wood and sand everything up to 180 grit before I could then go back to the brass and polish it up. But in the end, well, the end will be the end. You'll see. First, a heavy round over and a sneak peek. So tell me at this point, do you believe the title will be fulfilled? In truth, I was never in doubt from this point out. Why? Well, because I was ignoring function entirely. At this point, I was making a sculpture. Well, that's what it felt like anyway. But then reality hits. Yes, beauty is #1 key here, the #1 aim. But can you class a lamp that can't stand up as beautiful? Live mark. The bad. The head is really heavy. So when I'm holding it closer to this end, yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do with the base. And falling sideways is a very real problem. The other bad is that the roundover bit got away from me a little bit. Now, my favourite part of the game. What was I thinking? You see, my idea here was to hide the power. So the wire is going to come from the head, down into the body, through the body, into the base and away to the plug. I routed channel through all of these and then I drilled through the bottom too. And then when I joined them together, well, I made sure that they met. All except one. There's no hiding from it. A lamp with no light is simply not beautiful. And if the wire can't go through the body, well, that's not beautiful either. I was gutted. But where I don't have all the skills needed for this build as a whole, I do have skills developed from making many, many mistakes over the years and learning how to hide them. So here's what I did. I made a hole along the seam in the inside, as deep as the holes for the wires. I found the wire, then I bridged the join and I filled it back in again. Tell me at the end of this fix if you can see it. And then I'll show you once again at the very finish on the finished item where it will show up a little bit more. But for now, that's one issue fixed. Now for the feet and the weight issue. I need the feet to carry features from the lamp itself, so I transferred the curve. Then I mirrored it and I refined the shape. At this point, I had no clue whether the feet would actually hold up the body and the head combination. But if I made them any larger to guarantee they would work, the beauty would suffer. And at this point, I can't have that. The only way to know that it's worked is to attach the head onto the body with these brass fixings. It's the last construction job and then you can tell me if the title has been met. And I will say this in all openness. I will accept your ruling on this project. I understand that you haven't seen everything I've ever built, but let's say this. You tell me if this is beautiful. And start your comment with beauty so that I know that you've seen this long enough to pass genuine judgment that I need to take to heart. Forget function. Forget effectiveness, just the look, just the feel of the piece. But so I can try and persuade you, let me get this sanded and apply some finish to the piece. Just a coat of tung oil, finished with a wax polish on top. There are some things about this build that I messed up. There are failings that you don't quite see. But overall, I set myself a challenge, and only really you can tell me if I've achieved it. What I will say is that this has taken me weeks. Well, more than it should have done. And I've learned along the way that decisions are not well made by chasing just one goal, in this case beauty. But simplifying the aim does bring a certain level of clarity of purpose. But I'll await your judgment. Thanks a lot for watching.